So with this week, I got a thing. It was the eligibility for the 2016 NFL Draft happened today on Friday, and not a record, but too shy of a record. 96 underclassmen declared for the draft, like officially put their name in there in the draft kind of thing, and that's, like I said, it was too short of a record. 2014, when Mariota and Winston were the quarterback, top two guys, that was the record at 98. It was some had like upwards of 100, like 115, 110, 120, somewhere in that range, were expected to be coming out into the draft, but only 96 did. So what I'm going to be talking about is is that a good thing that 96 underclassmen come out, and what to make of it, I guess. So I'm going to start with the underclassmen. Obviously, they think they have the talent. Most of them, well, all of them think they have the talent to be in the NFL, but there's also a lot of seniors and stuff that are in the that are going into the draft as well with them. So guys that have the track record of being either really good or what have you, with them being in college for 4 years, compared to these guys that were in there for 2, maybe 3 years. Well, 3 years of in college, but only 2 years playing the sport, or 3 years playing football. And that kind of worries me, that all these young guys, as I'm about to be a junior next year, that I'll be only 20, so these kids are 20, 21, 20 or 21, maybe 22 if they're a little bit of an older guy, or in Calvin Ridley of Alabama's case, 24 when he's a junior. That they're thinking, oh, I have the talent to go play with these other guys that are in their prime at 28, 29, 30, all the way up to 33, and that's their prime, is 28 to 33, and these kids are coming out of the NCAA, or out of football, college football, at 20, 21, 22 as early declarees, where they haven't even finished a degree in college. They're just they finished 3 years. They finished their 3 years of college, and they think that they're good. They can last in the NFL. But what I noticed last year was a lot of those 98. Yeah, there was, I think 50 of them, maybe 60 of them were actually drafted throughout the 7 rounds, but a lot of them went undrafted, because if you think about the amount of seniors that graduated too, if last year's was a record at 98, then, 2 years ago was a record at 98, then you had this year at 96. The year before that, when it was 98, there had to be a lot of seniors, because that's the record, and there's no way that those kids that were before the year before that didn't leave early because it wasn't a record. So I guess that's hard to follow, and I can't really put into words how I'm trying to think of it, but it kind of makes sense. If you just have to think about the year before, juniors didn't declare, so they're seniors now, and they're in the draft. So that's kind of how to think about it, I guess. So that obviously, that number of seniors is going to go down, and the juniors are going to go up. So I think that if it's a bad thing, because these underclassmen who are 20, 21, 22 are undrafted, and yeah, some of them get signed to teams, some of them don't get signed to teams, some of them have to quit football altogether because no one's everyone, or every NFL team is hey, we don't really care about you. You're not that as good as the guys we have currently. Get a little bit better and we'll talk again. But so there's obviously that. But what I'm talking about with that is these kids don't have a degree. They could go back to college, but I think they still have the scholarship too. I'm not sure how that all works, but they could go back to college to finish their degree and kind of go back with their tail between their legs thing, or they could just try and make it on their own, working at like Walmart, working at a Foot Locker, or whatever they do. And it's just a bad thing for the league, obviously, because you got all these young kids with coming out of like thinking that they're really good, because you got like the Mel Kipers and Todd McShays and all those guys, Mike McCoys, Mayock, sorry, and all that, just saying, oh, this kid could be the next generational talent. And then they go to the NFL with that big head, and they're like, oh, I'm not that good. I thought I was, but I guess I'm not. So, I mean, obviously there's some kids that are really, really good, but not always. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this year. I want to see the numbers of who or how many of the underclassmen get drafted compared to undrafted, and how long they stay on the teams and how good they do and all that stuff. And at the Combine, I might do a little, I mean, I can't watch it this year because I don't have NFL Network, but I'll do a little stats comparison between seniors and juniors, or seniors and underclassmen, and see who tests out better. I still think it's gonna be seniors, so I don't know why. Like, in this kind of, I guess going back to why this is spurred on is because NFL teams kind of go for the youth instead of the experience nowadays with their drafting. Like, obviously you don't want to be the Browns and go after Brandon Weeden, who's like 28, 26, 28, whatever he was, when he was basically coming at the very tail end of his prime, or in the very middle of his prime, but he was still in college when he got drafted. But I mean, there's just special cases like that. And then looking at like other teams, a lot of them go after like the youth and say, oh, hey, you're coming out of college, you got to be really fast and athletic and springy and all this stuff. And people like say, oh, that's really good for them. That's a good pick. It's a great pick for them, whatever. And then they don't pan out because they're starting to be like thrown into the fire basically at 20, 21, and kind of quit. Or not quit, but like don't do as good as they're expected to. So I think that's kind of another thing to consider with that, is that a lot of these people don't really do anything. Like they do a lot in college, but most of that's by the system. And we'll have a little bit more of a discussion about that later on, closer to the draft. So I think that this declaration of junior eligible kids is not really a good thing, and they should stay in school for all 4 years just in case they're not as good as they think and being able to play in the NFL. So we'll see if the NFL ever changes it, if the NBA ever changes it. I like the MLB's rule. You can either come out in high school or you can wait your 2 years, but that's another topic for another time. So I guess we'll see what happens in the future. So like I said, this is a bad rule, I think, for the NFL, and they want to put out a good product, and they just have a bunch of young kids not really knowing what they're doing. So I guess that's really all I could say about this. It's hard to go into detail when you don't have all the stats to back it up. Like I don't have it yet. There's only been 1 year of it, so we'll see what happens.